Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy, the Horrorlander. We are back again with Goosebumps, The Vanishing, but now I'm going to be covering episode 2, which is Stay Out of the Basement Part 2, which means that this is going to be concluding that section of the storyline. So, without further ado, let's get into the review. This episode opens up where we left off, except Dr. Brewer is now within the basement, and he is checking out his arm. He had seemed to got infected by that basically spore, venom type of symbiote matter. And now, as you see his cast, that he's bandaged up his arm from where it got damaged with that rash, there is a worm-like tendril that is crawling out and basically poking at his face. As he starts to unwrap his cast, he then sees that there are several worm-like appendage tendrils that are moving around and coming out of his arm. He starts recording and basically talking about this weird sort of growth in his arm. And as he takes tweezers and tries to pull it out, one of the tendrils basically keeps extending. And he realizes that there's something actually buried inside of his arm in which the tendrils are coming out of.
There's something in my arm!
He then, in a very disgusting but good scene, takes a pair of little cutters, starts cutting open his arm where that black gunk starts pouring out of, and he pulls out this giant bulbous kind of like flower petal bud, and when he pulls it out of him, and it's a hefty baseball-sized flower bud inside of his arm, those worm-like tendrils then come out with it, and he puts it in a tea tree dish. This was a very disgusting and disturbing scene. It reminds me of the urban legend of the cast. It's kind of like an homage to that. For those of you who don't know, there's an urban legend where it's about a kid who basically keeps scratching under his cast, and eventually when he opens it up, there are like worms underneath it. There's also a part of it where I guess it involved like rats. That's from the Haunting Hour episode adaptation. I enjoyed seeing this, man. This was a disturbing scene for sure. Definitely started making your skin crawl, and not for the squeamish. As Dr. Brewer basically throws this little creature inside of a freezer because he realizes that it's alive and is actually an animal, not a form of plant life, and that too might be a new species which is potentially dangerous. Devin, Trey, and Frankie are now back to their love triangle as you see it. Frankie's breaking up with Trey as he hits her with like the most W gaslighting I've ever seen. Basically just gaslights her into thinking that it's her fault, and trying to pin the blame on her, even though he's the one who basically messed up Devin and got him sick and not feeling good, and basically got them into legal trouble as well. This then causes Frankie to break up with Trey, and now she's sort of leaning towards Devin. You see them sort of bonding and having chemistry between each other. Trey is even more mad at the fact that with an encounter with Dr. Brewer, since he keeps parking his vehicle in his driveway, Dr. Brewer is acting weird, and all of a sudden he snaps on Trey and basically takes a shovel and smashes his window, damaging his property, and now putting Trey in an even worse position.
Yo, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind?
It's a distinct possibility.
After he gets into a fight with Devin over Frankie, and now he sees how his father had damaged his vehicle, he plans on getting some payback by breaking into his basement, vandalizing his property, and destroying a lot of the different plants he has. Of course, he's unaware of the animal species flower bud that's inside of the freezer, and as he gets down there, let's just say that Trey bites off more than he can chew. But the flower bud itself is not biting off more than it can chew. No, it's getting straight to business.
Oh, that's not good.
Yes, sir, bro. We smoking on that Trey pack. R.I.P. Bozo, bro. This dude is a gaslighting piece of shit, bro. He is ass, my guy. He gets pissed off, and on top of that, Devin starts throwing the hands with him. Yo, shout out to Devin, bro. Devin got mad at Trey after he's punched him. Basically, Trey was upset that he's basically hooking up with Frankie now, and he started giving that boy the business, bro. Started getting on the ground with him, hitting him with the 1-2, and then on top of that, he called out Trey for having a fake-ass chain. Nah, bro. After that, you just gotta hold that L, and now you're getting packed up by the flower bud, bro. Hey, yo. Hey, shit. Puff, puff, pass on that Trey pack, my boy. And then obviously as the story continues, you see that Devin is now requiring the help of CJ as they go into the sewers and try to figure out what's going on with this whole plant business, this whole weird black liquid spore business that is basically affecting Devin. And at the same time, you see how the Trey storyline works out and how there might be some threats on the loose. And there is a particularly very disturbing, very gory, very terrifying threat that is now being unleashed onto the town. And it had some very good scenes with it. Overall, what are my thoughts about this episode? Well, first, let's get into the positives. This episode is definitely a step up from the first episode. This episode is bringing more of that bang, especially when you open up with, again, a very disturbing scene with those wormy tendrils coming out of Dr. Brewer's arm, him trying to pull it out, and then the fact that he pulls out, a little cutting tool and starts scissoring and cutting open his arm, and that black goo is coming out of it, and then he pulls out that baseball-sized flower bud and ends up taking it out of his arm with the tendrils. It's very disgusting, very squeamish, very just sort of makes you cringe, but it's in a good way. It's definitely leaning into more of the horror aspect that I think we were all looking for. The actual flower bud species itself is pretty threatening. You get some pretty scary scenes with it, and you get a pretty disturbing attack scene. I also, again, love the threat that you see towards the end of the episode. I can't speak on what it is, but man, it had like some practical effects to it. I think there was some CGI mixed with practical effects, but it is gory, it is disturbing. There is a scene with a certain character inside of the basement, and there is basically this very gory, torn up arm that reaches through the plants and tries to grab them, and then you see what that arm belongs to, and it's horrific, man. It's absolutely horrific. There's also some better tension as you see between characters. That one criminal girl who you didn't see much of in the last episode, you find out she was actually put into juvie by the police officer who Dr. Brewer often works with and keeps in contact with, and that lady is her mom. I also liked Frankie's acting in this episode more. You kind of see more of her family life. You got more of her emotion. And you see how Devin and her relationship kind of work out. And they do have some charming scenes in between each other. Trey's acting with the gaslighting scene is also pretty good. As much of a piece of shit he is, he's meant to be. And he did have a good scene there. So I got to give credit where credit is due. The acting involving the teenagers is better in this episode than it was last episode. And I feel like I enjoyed more of their characters' presence in this one outside of Cece, because Cece really hasn't had much improvement overall. CJ's in this one. He teams up with Devin, and I actually like that because, as I said in the last review, I like CJ's character. He's definitely the most natural feeling teenager out of all of them, and I enjoy his presence the most. So seeing him with the most fleshed out protagonist, Devin, and them working together is pretty good. The only real negative I have involving this episode is the dialogue. Again, while there are better character scenes within this episode and there is good gore, those dialogue scenes, like the good ones, are interrupted by just bad and cringy dialogue. There's a point where Trey is trying to break into the basement and you see Frankie basically meet up with them, and they have like some kind of stupid back and forth where Trey's just sort of leaving out some corny lines and Frankie's basically just sitting there and looking and not doing anything. It's just like, why the fuck are you in the scene? And Trey is just spitting out some random shit. They try to make it comedic during some of the more serious points. There's also a really just cringy scene between Devin and Frankie where Frankie had a good emotional moment overall, and then the scene gets interrupted with dialogue like this.
Oh yeah, and by the way, this situation is totally not bussin'. Oh my god, I can't believe this guy.
Shit, I thought bussin' was a retro word. I thought we wasn't using the word bussin' anymore. Damn. That is dead ass a piece of dialogue in this episode, and it's those dialogue scenes that just, it stops it from being flat out good. And again, some of the parts of these episodes kind of feel like they're bouncing between story structures. There's a lot of bouncing back and forth between this character and this character and this character and this character, but overall this episode was a step up. So what do I give this episode? I'm gonna give this episode actually a pretty good score. I'm gonna give it a 7.3 out of 10, which means that this is an above average episode, and actually it's encroaching upon pretty good. So honestly, for this one, I'd put it anywhere between like 7.3 and 7.5. This is an above average episode, above decent, and it's encroaching upon basically being pretty good. So yeah, I'm satisfied with this episode. This hit more than the first episode, and I did like the improvements to some of the characters. The body horror scenes were really good. That one threat and the practical effects and some of the disturbing imagery behind it was pretty good as well. So yeah, I'm happy with this one. This one gets a thumbs up out of me. Definitely an improvement to the first episode. That's all I got for this video. If you enjoyed, again, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment down below. I released these 2 episodes today because it's part 1 and part 2. Now the rest of the episodes I'm going to be releasing one day after the other, or at least trying to. So stay tuned for more content to come. Deuces.
Arrivederci.